The towel slipped from my hands, but I didn't flinch. Her laugh, a dry, hollow chuckle that bounced off the laundry room tiles, hung in the air like mildew. "You're lucky I even let you touch me." That's what she said, like I was some leper who'd won a raffle. Like decades of providing, fixing, covering her mistakes, and paying off her credit card messes were just some pathetic tribute she tolerated out of politeness. She turned, humming, tossing her blouse into the dryer like nothing had happened. I just watched her. Not angry, not even sad. Something quieter, sharper. I folded the last t-shirt, an old one from the state fair we went to, back before her veneers, before her Pilates instructor with the stupid name, before she stopped asking how my day was. I folded it with more care than I'd handled her in months, set it neatly on the stack, and walked out. In the hallway, her phone buzzed. A giggle. Another message. Another little compliment from whoever she thought was her escape hatch. Her voice changed when she texted lately. Eerier, like she was suddenly 20 again. I used to like that sound. Now it just reminded me that good liars always enjoy the setup. I passed the hall mirror. Wrinkled, sure, maybe slower than I was at 40. But I built machines that carved titanium to half a human hair's width. I ran a team of 20 men who didn't dare miss a measurement. I wasn't some slob hoping for scraps of affection. In this house, though, I was a placeholder. And placeholders don't argue. We execute. Downstairs, in my office, I opened a drawer that hadn't been touched in months. Inside was a small, smooth oak box I'd carved myself after retiring. It was supposed to hold cufflinks. Instead, it held clarity. Still empty, but not for long. The laptop's glow lit the room. No rush, no drama. Just a man doing what he always did, cataloging, protecting, cleaning up someone else's mess. The folder was still there, waiting for the day she smirked. First came the email printouts. A realtor friend of hers, Celeste, had CC'd her on messages about fun weekends in Ridge Hill. Dates that just happened to match the training retreats she billed to her firm. One included a rental car receipt in Vanessa's name, with a second driver added. Not me. Then the texts. I'd synced her phone to the family iPad months ago. She never noticed. She thought it was just for streaming Netflix in the guest room. One thread stood out. Can't wait to see you outside the sheets for once LOL. His reply was a shirtless selfie in a hotel bathroom I recognized instantly. The Burstone. Betrayal has a smell. That place always reeked of lavender and stale desperation. She came down later that night in the smug little robe she wore when she wanted to play affectionate wife. You didn't say goodnight, she said. I figured you were tired of touching me. I replied, smiling. She blinked. The moment passed. You're being dramatic, she muttered. I nodded slowly, like a man who didn't mind being underestimated. Because men like me, we don't need second chances. We need evidence. The house went quiet around 11:17 p.m. Vanessa was upstairs, tablet sliding off her chest, some real estate podcast mumbling in her earbuds about market trends she only understood when her assistant explained them. Her face twitched in sleep, maybe dreaming she was still the prize she imagined herself to be. In her dream, she probably had her little beige Range Rover parked outside some luxury open house, wine glass in hand, fake laughs echoing for the sake of Instagram. I stood in the hallway for a few minutes, listening to her soft snores and the occasional ping from the man she called just a contact in the industry. Back in the office, I kept the lights off. Only the desk lamp, me, and the oak box. I opened it. Still empty. Not for long. The printer hummed to life. One by one, Celeste's emails slid into the tray, flights booked under her maiden name, dinners for 2 billed to cash accounts, none of them appearing on our joint card. Vanessa thought I was the kind of man who didn't check receipts. Maybe that was true, but I check patterns. And people like her? They always leave fingerprints. I organized the emails chronologically. Patterns tell a better story than passion ever could. Then came the iPad. Still synced, still backing up her texts every night while she was busy thinking she'd deleted them. Slowness, she always joked, was my flaw. You move like you're buffering, she once told me in front of friends. They laughed. I smiled. Because slowness isn't weakness. It's precision. I screenshotted everything. Messages between showings, one with location tags still attached. I needed that last night. Let's do lunch before I head home. Timestamp, 1:42 p.m. Her excuse to me? Board meeting. The he in question? A contractor we once hired to fix our deck. I'd offered him a beer. He'd thanked me like a son. One text froze my hands on the screen. He's nice but dull. A placeholder. My life started late. Dull. Placeholder. I saved the file. Dropped it into the folder marked June Justice. Encrypted. Backed up. Triple copies. One flash drive. One cloud. One physical binder off-site. It wasn't paranoia. It was insurance. Because if Vanessa thought she was planning her exit, she hadn't considered that I'd already built mine. The next morning, I made her coffee. Not because I wanted to, but because patterns matter. She strolled in wearing leggings and a sweatshirt from some overpriced yoga retreat, scrolling her phone like I was background noise. "Morning," she said, without looking up. "Morning," I replied, sliding the mug toward her. She sipped, made a satisfied little hum, and wandered off toward the patio. That was fine. I wanted her calm. At 9:02 a.m., I sent the first email. Subject line, Preliminary Asset Review. My lawyer had been briefed, the documents already prepped, hidden under the dull title Property Insurance Updates in my Dropbox, so if she ever stumbled across them, she'd get bored and close it. Step 1 was simple: secure the accounts. I moved my personal funds into a separate institution she didn't know existed. Step 2, freeze the home equity line of credit before she could suddenly renovate her way into debt. By lunch, she was still in her robe, FaceTiming Celeste, laughing about some accidental meeting at the Burstone next week. I sat at my desk, marking dates on a calendar, hers and mine. Hers for evidence, mine for execution. At 3:17 p.m., I drove to a storage unit I'd rented under a company name. Inside were 3 large banker's boxes. One labeled financial, one communications, and the last simply exit. The first 2 were self-explanatory. The third, that was the fun one. It contained copies of every damaging thing I'd ever found. Emails, photos, tax discrepancies, and a neat little list of business partners whose dealings wouldn't look good in court. Vanessa loved to play in gray areas. I loved to document them. When I came home, she was in the kitchen pouring wine, her third glass, if the half-empty bottle on the counter was any sign. "You're quiet," she said. "Just tired," I replied. She smiled faintly. "We should do a getaway. Just the 2 of us." I looked at her, thinking of the hotel selfies with other men, the receipts, the messages about me being a placeholder. "Sure," I said. "Let's plan it." And in that moment, she thought she was winning. If you've ever watched someone bluff with a bad poker hand, you know the exact look she had at breakfast the next day. All teeth, too much confidence, but the eyes giving away the little flicker of doubt. She poured herself orange juice, freshly squeezed, because heaven forbid she suffer the store-bought stuff, and leaned against the counter like she owned the place. Which, on paper, she thought she did. "So," she began, drawing the word out like she was prepping for a confession but wanted me to drag it out of her. "About that getaway. I was thinking somewhere warm. Maybe the coast. Somewhere with no cell service." That last part was interesting. Vanessa without a phone was like a shark without teeth. Still dangerous, but you'd have to work harder to get hurt. I buttered my toast slowly. "Sounds nice. We'll have to pick a time that works." She tilted her head. "Why not next weekend?" I chewed, nodded like I was considering it. Then let a small smile creep in. "Next weekend might be tricky. I've got meetings." "Meetings?" she repeated, her voice a touch higher. "On a weekend? Some projects need tightening up," I said, sipping my coffee. "It's a timing thing. You wouldn't understand." She didn't like that. Vanessa thrived on being the smartest in the room, even if the only subject was which overpriced kitchen tile would bring out the energy of the space. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it quickly, but not quickly enough for me to miss the contact name. Connor, contractor. I'd bet my life he hadn't been hired to build anything that required a permit. "Work call?" I asked, keeping my tone innocent. She smiled without looking up. "Just sorting out some home stuff." "Good," I said. "We've got a lot to keep in order." That landed harder than I intended. She set the phone down face down and sipped her juice, watching me like she was trying to read my mind. Which was fine. She'd get nothing but static. By noon, she was gone, supposedly meeting a client. I watched her Range Rover pull out of the driveway, waited 2 minutes, then got in my truck and drove the opposite direction. My destination, the small office of a friend who owed me a favor. Pete worked in private investigations, the sort of man who could get you photos, times, and even audio without ever tripping over legality in a way that could stick. I slid the folder of what I already had across his desk. This is a start, I told him. But I need her movements mapped for the next 2 weeks. I want locations, who she's with, and I want timestamps. Pete flipped through the evidence, raised his eyebrows. You're already halfway there. What's the play? Not divorce, I said. Not yet. I want her thinking she's untouchable. I want her talking. He nodded. You want the deep dig. Exactly. He promised an update in 3 days. I promised a bottle of the bourbon he liked that tasted like gasoline and regret. That night, she was oddly attentive. Made dinner. Even put on music. How was your day? She asked while stirring the pasta, like this was some Hallmark scene. Productive, I said. Yours? She shrugged. Same old. I did run into Celeste at lunch. Nice, I said. You two are close. She's a good friend, Vanessa replied, a little too quickly. Always looking out for me. I let that hang in the air while she served dinner. She was watching me for some kind of tell, but I gave her nothing. I chewed my food, thanked her for cooking, and even helped clear the dishes. The thing about Vanessa was, she needed to be sure she had control. Silence unsettled her. If I argued, she knew where I stood. If I smiled and said nothing, she started chasing ghosts. By the time we went to bed, she was scrolling her phone more than usual, flipping it face down whenever I shifted. I pretended not to notice. 3 days later, Pete called. She's busy, he said without preamble. Burstone twice, lunch with the contractor, Connor, 3 times. Also, there's a third guy. Third. Name's Gavin. Mid-30s. Drives a white BMW. They met at the Riverfront Cafe, sat outside for an hour, kissed twice, left in separate cars. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Patterns, I said. Pete chuckled. Oh, there's a pattern. You want photos? Yes. And I want a couple of shots with dates visible, receipts, menus, anything that proves they were together on specific days. Done, he said. That evening, Vanessa came home later than usual, her hair slightly windblown, lipstick a shade I'd never seen before. She kicked off her heels in the entryway and sighed like she'd just survived something exhausting. Long day, I asked from the couch. Clients, she said, heading to the kitchen. I followed her in, leaned against the counter. Funny thing, Pete from the Rotary Club said he saw you downtown. Said you looked happy. Her hand froze halfway to the wine bottle. Pete's mistaken. Maybe, I said, shrugging. He's not as sharp as he used to be. She poured herself a glass, took a sip, and didn't meet my eyes. The crack in her confidence was there now, thin but visible. Over the next week, I played my role to perfection. Calm, polite, occasionally distant, but never enough to be accused of sulking. I let her think she was still calling the shots. Every time she left the house, I noted the time. Every time she came back, I noticed the smell of unfamiliar cologne or the faint shimmer of lip gloss she'd never wear for me. Pete kept feeding me more. Photos of her holding hands with Connor in the parking garage. Gavin brushing her hair back at the cafe. A single, damning image of her walking out of the Burstone with an overnight bag in one hand and her phone in the other, smiling at someone just out of frame. By the second week, I had enough to bury her in court, socially and financially. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger. Not yet. Because Vanessa wasn't just going to fall. She was going to walk herself right to the edge, thinking she was the one in control, and then step off without realizing I'd already moved the ground. The first Real slip happened on a Thursday night. We were in the living room, her scrolling her phone, me pretending to read. Out of nowhere, she said, "We should sell the lake house." I lowered my book. The one my father left me? It's a lot of upkeep for somewhere we barely use. And the market's hot right now. That was when I knew she'd already been talking to someone about money. Her sudden interest in liquidating assets that were solely in my name wasn't a coincidence. She wanted cash, and she wanted it fast. I smiled slowly. You might be right. Let me think on it. Her eyes narrowed, half suspicious, half calculating. She wanted me to resist so she could push harder. Instead, I gave her agreement, which unsettled her more. She was starting to wonder if she'd underestimated me, which was perfect. The cracks were showing. She was double-checking my mood, asking odd questions about schedules, even making small talk with my friends, people she used to openly ignore. What she didn't realize was, every question she asked told me more about her than about me. And by the time the next Friday rolled around, I had the final piece I needed. Pete dropped off an envelope at my office, sealed, unmarked. Inside were 3 photographs and a short note. The first 2 were the usual, Vanessa with Connor, Vanessa with Gavin. The third was different. It was her, laughing, leaning across a table toward a man I didn't recognize. The timestamp matched a night she'd told me she was meeting Celeste to go over staging plans. For men. Patterns. Always patterns. I put the photos in the oak box, closed the lid, and smiled. Because the cracks weren't just in her confidence anymore. They were in the entire facade. And soon, the whole thing was going to shatter. The oak box sat in the middle of my desk like it was alive. For men. For different patterns. All of them documented in neat little chronological lines that could turn any courtroom into a firing squad. I didn't look at the photos that morning. I didn't need to. They were already burned into my mind, down to the grain in the cafe table where she'd been leaning toward the fourth guy. What mattered now wasn't seeing them. It was using them. I'd learned a long time ago that the best revenge isn't just about catching someone. It's about catching them in a way that makes their exit more expensive than they can survive. The first step? Isolation. Vanessa thrived on social scaffolding, friends, colleagues, flirty, work husbands who told her she was glowing when she was really just running on caffeine and other men's attention. I couldn't stop her from seeing them yet, but I could make sure when the time came, they'd be busy protecting themselves instead of her. So, I began with Celeste. She was the easiest target, always helping Vanessa arrange little getaways. I emailed her an anonymous tip, using a burner account Pete had set up for me. It was short, polite, and included a single blurred photo of her husband leaving a bar with a woman who wasn't her. It wasn't Vanessa, but Celeste didn't need to know that. By the end of the day, I knew the seed had been planted. Celeste called Vanessa 3 times that evening, each time shorter and sharper than the last. I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't need to. I could hear the irritation in Vanessa's voice as she stomped upstairs after the third call. One crack in the support beams. Next came Connor, the deck contractor. My strategy there was simpler: make him a liability. I called a building inspector I knew from my manufacturing days, tipped him off about unlicensed work at Connor's last big job. The inspector didn't care who I was, just that I gave him an address and a reason. 2 days later, Connor's name was in a local trade bulletin under work site violations. Nothing career-ending, but enough to make him duck for cover for a while. Vanessa didn't mention him for a week. 2 beams down. Gavin was trickier. He wasn't tied to her work or our social circle, just some free agent with a BMW and too much cologne. I couldn't cut him off directly without tipping my hand. Instead, I had Pete run a quiet background check. Turns out, Gavin was between jobs and living on credit cards. That was perfect. I sent him a very convincing email posing as a debt relief service, offering a confidential consultation at a time I knew Vanessa would be expecting him. When he didn't show, she called him 5 times. He didn't pick up. By Sunday, she was pacing the kitchen, muttering about people being so unreliable. 3 beams. The fourth guy, the cafe stranger, was my favorite. Because he wasn't in any of her previous patterns, I figured he was new. Maybe even disposable. That meant I could use him to make her paranoid without revealing my cards. Pete tracked him down in less than 24 hours. Real name, Evan Ross. Works in finance. Married. 2 kids. I didn't tell Pete what to do. He just nodded and said, "I'll handle it." 2 days later, Vanessa got a furious text in all caps, "Stay away from my husband." She stared at her phone for a long time at breakfast, didn't touch her food, and eventually muttered something about jealous psychos before leaving the table. The scaffolding wasn't gone yet, but it was wobbling. While the people in her little harem were dealing with their own fires, I turned inward, toward the money. That Thursday, I scheduled a quiet meeting with my lawyer, Nathan. We sat in his glass-walled office, the kind with leather chairs that feel like you're sinking into someone's expense account. I slid the first folder across to him. "This is phase 1, I said. He flipped through the photos, the bank statements, the receipts. His eyebrows climbed higher with each page. "You've got enough here to leave her with nothing," he said flatly. "She's going to fight, though? Someone like this. She won't see it coming." I interrupted. Nathan looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, what do you want first? Property division or public relations?" "Both," I said. "Simultaneous. I want her too busy putting out one fire to notice the other until it's over." That night, Vanessa tried to test the waters. She came into my office, leaning in the doorway with that faux casual posture she used when she wanted to bait me. "You've been different lately," she said. "Different how?" I asked without looking up from my screen. "Quieter. Not asking where I'm going. Not interfering." I clicked my mouse, made a note in the margin of a spreadsheet. "Maybe I'm just respecting your independence." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good. I like that." I didn't answer. Just let the silence stretch until she pushed off the doorframe and walked away. By Saturday, Pete sent me an update. Celeste wasn't speaking to her. Connor had gone dark. Gavin had blocked her. And Evan? His wife had posted a photo of the two of them on Facebook with a caption that could have been a court exhibit. Some people forget their vows. We don't. Vanessa was restless. She spent more time on her phone, sent more texts, got fewer replies. The tension in the house was almost sweet, like the air before a storm you know is going to be in your favor. The first strike, though, the one she would feel in her bones, wasn't social. It was financial. I timed it for Monday morning, knowing she'd be juggling client meetings and whatever scraps were left of her outside adventures. I called the bank, transferred every liquid asset from our joint accounts into an account solely in my name. Perfectly legal, thanks to some paperwork Nathan had filed weeks earlier under the guise of investment reallocation. By the time she logged into the bank app, the joint account was a shell. Enough to buy groceries, not enough to book a weekend at the Burstone. She stormed into my office that afternoon, phone in hand. "Did you do something to our accounts?" I looked up from my laptop, expression blank. "Accounts? Don't play dumb. They're nearly empty." "Oh," I said lightly. "Yeah, I moved some things around. Market volatility, you know? Safer this way." Her jaw tightened. "You should have told me." "I didn't think you'd care," I said, letting my gaze drift back to my screen. "You've been so busy." She stood there for a long moment, breathing through her nose, then spun on her heel and walked out. That night, she didn't come to bed until after midnight. I heard her pacing downstairs, making calls, probably to whoever she thought could help her. But the beauty of the first strike was that it didn't end with the accounts. By Wednesday, she'd discovered the credit cards had lower limits. The home equity line was frozen. And the emergency fund she liked to dip into without asking, that was sitting in a trust she had no access to. One move, multiple hits. The oak box was heavier now, not because I'd added anything to it, but because I knew it was more than evidence. It was momentum. And momentum, once it's on your side, is almost impossible to stop. She thought the game was still about secrets and whispers, but I'd already moved to the part where you start rearranging the board itself. And Vanessa? She hadn't even realized the rules had changed. The morning she started losing her grip wasn't loud. It was quiet, too quiet for her taste. Vanessa needed noise to survive. Calls, texts, attention pinging her every hour like she was some CEO with stock prices to watch. That Wednesday, there was none. She came into the kitchen at 8:15 a.m., hair still perfect, makeup just shy of professional. She poured coffee without looking at me, sat at the table, and started scrolling her phone like she was trying to will it into lighting up with messages. After about 2 minutes, she asked, "Do you know if the Wi-Fi's working?" I didn't look up from my eggs. "Seems fine." She frowned, tapping at the screen. "People just aren't answering this week. It's weird." I stabbed another bite with my fork. "Maybe they're busy." Her head lifted just enough for me to catch the flicker of uncertainty. "Yeah, maybe." I didn't tell her that Celeste had blocked her. Connor was knee-deep in contractor violations. Gavin was ghosting her, and Evan's wife was still tagging him in loyal husband posts. That was the point. She needed to think the silence was random, not engineered. The same day, I had lunch with Nathan, my lawyer. He'd finished setting up the legal scaffolding for the next phase, one Vanessa wouldn't see coming until it was over. "She has no idea you've cut her out of every major asset," Nathan said, scanning the binder in front of him. "And she can't contest most of it because the paperwork was filed before she realized anything was happening." "Good," I said. "The last thing I want is for her to think she can negotiate." Nathan smirked. "So when do we drop it on her?" "Not yet," I replied. "I want her desperate first. I want her reaching for lifelines that aren't there." "Meaning?" I leaned back in my chair. "Meaning she'll be so busy trying to save her own skin, she won't see me pulling the floor out from under her." At home, she was already showing signs of desperation. Thursday morning, she mentioned the lake house again. You've had a few days to think, she said while buttering toast. We could get a great price. We'd have more freedom. Freedom for what? I asked. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but enough. Travel. Maybe invest in something. What kind of something? She shrugged like it didn't matter, but her eyes darted toward her phone. Opportunities. You know how it is. I smiled. I'll think about it. The truth was, the lake house was already in a trust she couldn't touch. But every time she brought it up, it told me one thing. She needed cash. Badly. The next stage of the trap involved that need. I called Pete and had him dig deeper, not into Vanessa this time, but into her work contacts. I wanted to know which ones were clean and which ones were vulnerable. By Friday, he had a list. At the top was a man named Raymond, a mid-tier investor who had once fronted Vanessa a small, staging loan for a property that mysteriously never sold. Pete's research showed Raymond's books were messy, and he wouldn't want his name coming up in any official inquiry. Perfect. I called Raymond from a pay-as-you-go phone, told him I had proof his loan to Vanessa had been used for personal expenses, and I was happy to forget it if he cut ties with her immediately. 2 hours later, Vanessa came home, phone in hand, furious. Do you know what Raymond just did? He pulled out of our arrangement. No warning. Why? I asked innocently. He said it's too risky to keep working with me, she snapped. Like I'm some kind of liability. I tilted my head. That's strange. Have you done anything risky lately? Her glare could have cracked glass. By the end of the week, she'd lost 2 more allies to sudden unavailability. One claimed to be traveling for the next 6 months. The other stopped returning calls altogether. Saturday morning, I caught her in the living room flipping through the mail, clearly looking for something that wasn't there. What are you hunting for? I asked. Just bills, she said quickly. But I knew better. She was waiting on a payment from a recent property sale. What she didn't know was that I'd already spoken to the escrow officer and had the funds delayed due to verification issues. All above board, all perfectly legal, just slow enough to make her squirm. The beauty of this phase was that it required very little from me. She was unraveling herself. By Sunday night, she was pacing the kitchen with a glass of wine, muttering about how everyone's acting strange. I sat at the counter, reading the paper. You think something's going around? I asked. She stopped pacing. What do you mean? I shrugged. You said everyone's been off lately. Could be bad luck. Could be something else. She narrowed her eyes. Something else like what? Like maybe you've been burning bridges without realizing it, I said casually. Her jaw clenched. She didn't answer. That night, I took the oak box out of the desk drawer and opened it. The contents were organized into 3 neat stacks now. Stack 1. Proof of infidelity. Photos, texts, receipts. Stack 2. Financial missteps. Evidence of loans. Personal spending from business accounts. Unpaid debts. Stack 3. Legal groundwork. Copies of trust documents, asset transfers, and Nathan's quiet reassignments of joint holdings. The box wasn't just leverage anymore. It was a blueprint. And the final phase of the trap was to let her think she still had a chance to salvage things, right up until she realized the salvage yard was mine. Monday morning, I set it in motion. I suggested we take that getaway she'd been hinting at. Somewhere close, to reconnect. Her eyes lit up, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled without forcing it. That's a great idea, she said. I booked a weekend at the Burstone. Yes, the same hotel she'd used for her little adventures. I wanted her comfortable. I wanted her to think she was still in control. Nathan arranged for a courier to deliver certain documents to the hotel during our stay, documents that would require her immediate signature if she didn't want to delay a pending sale. She'd sign without reading. She always did. What she wouldn't know was that the signature would finalize the last asset transfer, officially removing her from anything tied to my name. The rest would be timing. Friday evening, while she was sipping overpriced wine in the hotel bar, Pete would drop an envelope on her seat, photos of her and each man, labeled with dates and times. The envelope would be marked copy 1 of 6. She'd look at me, waiting for the explosion, but there wouldn't be one. I'd simply finish my drink, stand, and tell her, check your account balances when we get home. By the time she realized what had happened, everything that mattered would already be in my hands. The trap wasn't about punishing her in one dramatic moment. It was about letting her walk straight into a future where she'd already lost before she even knew the game had started. And we were only a week away that we drove to the Burstone on a Friday afternoon. She spent the ride touching up her makeup in the visor mirror, humming along to the radio like she was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. "Feels good to get away," she said as we pulled into the circular drive. "Yeah," I replied, letting the valet take my truck. Fresh air, no distractions. Inside, she seemed almost nostalgic. I caught her glancing toward the lounge area, like she was remembering one of her little rendezvous. I didn't say a word. I wanted her comfortable. Dinner that night was pleasant. I let her talk. She rambled about possible vacation homes, her dream of taking more control of her business, and how she wished we could be more of a team again. I smiled at all the right moments. Because the more she thought we were mending fences, the easier the fall would be. At 8:17 p.m., Pete texted, "Courier confirmed. Docs arrive tomorrow morning." At 8:19 p.m., Nathan texted, "Final transfer pending signature." Everything was in place. Saturday morning, I ordered breakfast to the room. She was still in the shower when there was a knock on the door. I opened it to a man in a plain suit holding a slim folder. "Documents for Mrs. Urgent signature required." I signed the acknowledgement form and left the folder on the desk. When she came out, towel drying her hair, I said, "Oh, someone dropped these off for you. Said it's for one of your listings. Something about avoiding delays." She frowned, flipped the folder open, skimmed the first page, then signed all three without hesitation. No reading, no questions. She was still humming when she handed it back to me. "Can you give those to the front desk?" "Sure," I said, sliding them into my own bag instead. Nathan's text came 10 minutes later. "Done. All clear." Just like that, she'd signed away her last ties to anything in my name. That evening, we were at the bar. She was on her second glass of red, telling me about a huge lead that could change her whole quarter. I nodded, let her talk. Then, at exactly 9:06 p.m., Pete walked past and slipped a large manila envelope onto the seat beside her. No eye contact, no pause. Just a shadow passing through the warm light. She glanced down, curious, and opened it. Inside, 4 stacks of photographs, each separated by a sticky note with a name and a date. Connor, Gavin, Evan, the contractor. Every timestamp matched a day she'd lied to me. Her face drained. She looked at me like she was bracing for a scene, but I didn't give her one. I finished my drink, stood, and said, "Check your accounts when we get home." I left the bar. She followed 3 minutes later, but I was already in the room, packing my bag. Sunday morning, we drove home in silence. The air between us felt like wet cement. As soon as we pulled into the driveway, she went inside, dropped her purse on the counter, and opened her laptop. I followed, leaning against the doorway as she clicked through each account: joint checking, savings, investment portfolio. All of them gutted. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I stopped financing your escape plan," I said evenly. "You can't." "I can. You signed it away yesterday morning." I held up my phone, showing her the signed transfer forms. "Every asset in my name is now locked. The house, mine. The lake house, in a trust. The business accounts, closed to you. The only thing left in your name is your car and whatever's in your personal checking." I didn't touch that. She stared at me, hands trembling. "You set me up." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I gave you room to hang yourself. You just took it." For the first time in months, she had no words. I left her standing there and went to the garage. The oak box was on the workbench. I opened it, looked at the stacks of evidence one last time, then slid it into the bottom drawer. It wasn't going to a lawyer. It wasn't going to the police. It was staying right there because the real revenge wasn't destroying her. It was letting her live in the shadow of knowing I could destroy her anytime I wanted. No divorce. No headlines. Just the slow, quiet suffocation of watching every door close and realizing the man you underestimated is now the landlord of your entire life. And that lasts longer than any court ruling.